The screams sliced through the savannah like jagged glass. Jonas staggered backward, his heart pounding like a war drum. Dust exploded into the air as 5 lionesses swarmed the poacher, their powerful bodies moving in perfect sync, graceful, ruthless, terrifying. The man didn't stand a chance. His rifle fell to the ground with a dull clunk, and then there was nothing but snarls, roars, and the horrific sound of flesh being torn from bone. Jonas wanted to turn away. He should have. But he couldn't move. He was staring into the primal core of the wild, justice, savage and immediate. The lionesses didn't kill out of hunger. They killed with purpose. With fury. And then, as quickly as it began, it ended. The man's mangled body lay motionless in the dirt. One of the lionesses let out a deep growl and stepped over him, not even glancing back. Her eyes locked on Jonas. He held his breath. Would they turn on him next? But then something happened that shook him even more than the attack. The lead lioness padded softly toward the injured male. She sniffed his bloodied paw, nudged his mane with her muzzle, and let out a soft, almost mournful chuff. They weren't strangers. Jonas's mouth fell open as the other 4 lionesses followed, circling the male protectively. 2 lay beside him, grooming his face gently. 1 curled her body around his flank. The 5th sat tall, eyes scanning the perimeter. It wasn't just a pride. It was a family. Jonas's voice trembled. You came for him. The lioness turned to look at him again, and for a moment he swore he saw recognition. Not the blank stare of a wild animal. Something else. Something intelligent. Suddenly the male stirred. He groaned and tried to rise, but his paw gave out beneath him and he collapsed with a pained roar. Jonas snapped out of his shock. The lion was still dying. The bleeding had slowed, but infection was already setting in. The swelling, the discoloration. It wouldn't be long before the damage spread. And there was no telling what internal injuries the trap had caused. Jonas knelt beside him again, only this time the lionesses didn't stop him. One even stepped aside to give him space. I need to get him out of here, Jonas muttered, fumbling for his radio. I need help. Come on. He pressed the call button. Static. No signal. Of course not. He was deep in the bush, too far for his handheld to reach the ranger station. He'd hiked in miles off the grid for photos. He hadn't expected this. His eyes darted around, calculating. He had a solar-powered flare kit and emergency beacon in his main gear case, 2 kilometers back near the edge of the plateau. If he ran, he could be there in 20 minutes. But he'd have to leave the lion. Alone. No, not alone. With the lionesses. He looked at them again. Still calm. Still silent. Still watching him. He stood slowly, slinging his bag over his shoulder. Stay with him. I'll be back. I promise. Then he ran. Every step felt like a hammer to the chest. Jonas pushed himself harder than he had in years, dodging branches, leaping fallen logs, lungs on fire. His boots slipped in the dry grass, thorns ripping at his legs, but he didn't care. By the time he reached the plateau, he was drenched in sweat and half blind from exhaustion. He threw himself onto his knees, yanked open his gear case and ripped the beacon from its foam. 1 button. 1 light. A red LED blinked on. A signal burst into the sky. Please, let someone be listening. He grabbed the flare gun next, loaded it and fired. A fiery orange streak shot high above the savannah. With nothing else to do but pray, Jonas turned and ran back. When he returned, he feared the worst. But the male lion was still alive. And he was no longer alone. The lionesses had arranged themselves in a tight circle around him. One had even draped herself partially across his body to shield him from the sun. Another licked his wounds gently. They looked up when Jonas appeared, but didn't move. Something had changed. Jonas walked slowly toward them, murmuring softly. I'm back. Help is coming. He knelt again, this time close enough to touch the male. His breathing was shallow but steady. The cloth bandage was soaked, and his leg had swollen like a balloon. He needed antibiotics, painkillers, fluids, a full vet team. Jonas gently patted his side. Just hang on, big guy. Don't you quit on me. Minutes passed. Hours. The sun crept higher. Vultures circled again, this time farther out, cautious. Then a distant rumble. Engines. Jonas jumped to his feet. He scrambled up the nearest rise and waved his arms frantically as 2 dark green ranger trucks tore across the savannah. They saw him. Relief slammed into him like a wave. The trucks skidded to a halt and 4 men in tan uniforms leapt out, rifles raised, until Jonas waved them down. Don't shoot, he shouted. He's down. They're protecting him. The rangers slowed as they approached, their eyes widening at the sight before them. "Holy hell," one muttered. "Is that?" "He was caught in a trap," Jonas explained breathlessly. "I freed him, but he's hurt bad. He needs help. The females," he gestured toward the lionesses, "they've been guarding him the whole time. They're not aggressive. They understand." The team's lead vet, a small but fierce woman named Nia, dropped beside the lion, her expression hardening as she assessed the damage. "We need to sedate him. This is going to be delicate." Jonas nodded. "Do it." The dart hit clean. The lion didn't even flinch, just exhaled and went limp. As the team moved in, the lionesses stood, snarling, but didn't attack. They paced, they circled, but kept their distance. And when the male was finally lifted onto a stretcher and loaded into the back of the truck, they followed. All five. Trotting behind the convoy like silent shadows, their golden eyes never leaving the injured king. Back at the field clinic near the ranger outpost, the work was intense. Emergency surgery. 4 fluids. Wound flushing. Jonas stayed up all night, watching through the glass as Nia and her team battled to save the lion's life. "He's strong," Nia said once, wiping sweat from her brow. "But this wasn't just a trap. He's malnourished. Dehydrated. He's been out there for days." Jonas nodded. "And those lionesses? They waited with him." "I've never seen anything like it," she admitted. "It's like they knew he was dying. And they refused to leave him behind." Outside, the lionesses still waited. They lay at the edge of the compound, never entering, never leaving, just watching. As dawn broke, Jonas stepped outside. One of the lionesses rose. The lead. She padded toward the fence, slowly, until only a few feet separated them. Jonas crouched and looked into her eyes. "I don't know what you are," he whispered. "But I've never seen love like that in the wild. Not like this." She blinked. And then, without a sound, she turned and walked away. The other 4 followed. One by one, they disappeared into the tall grass. Jonas didn't try to stop them. Because somehow, he knew they'd be back. And then, a soft groan behind him. He turned. Through the clinic window, the male lion stirred. His paw twitched. His eyes fluttered open. He was alive. But Jonas saw something else. Something that chilled him to his core. A branded mark. Burned into the lion's inner thigh, half hidden beneath his blood-stained fur. A circle. A spear. And the letter K. Jonas's stomach dropped. He knew that symbol. It wasn't just a hunter's mark. It was the crest of a black market wildlife syndicate. And this lion wasn't just a victim. He was a target. And they weren't done hunting him. Jonas couldn't tear his eyes away from the mark. The edges were raw, charred flesh fused into a raised welt, shaped into a perfect circle enclosing a downward-pointing spear. Above it, a crisp, unmistakable letter, K. He staggered back from the clinic window, pulse roaring in his ears. "Hey," he shouted. "Nia. Get in here. Now." She came running from the adjacent room, her gloves still slick with antiseptic. "What is it?" Jonas pointed. "His leg. That brand. Look." She crouched beside the sedated lion and peeled back the matted fur, squinting. When she saw the shape, her breath caught. "No. No, no, no." "You recognize it?" Jonas asked. She nodded grimly. "More than I'd like to." Jonas leaned closer. "What is it?" "It's the mark of Kafaru, one of the most violent poaching syndicates operating in Central and East Africa," Nia said, voice low and tight. "The name means rhinoceros in Swahili, but they don't just go after rhinos. They brand their captured animals before transporting them to underground auctions. Exotics, big cats, anything that'll sell for 6 figures or more." Jonas felt his stomach twist. So they caught him. Branded him. But he escaped. Or was rescued, Nia said. The injury on his paw? That trap may not have been the original one. It could have been meant to recapture him. Jonas suddenly remembered the lionesses. Their calculated arrival. The coordinated attack on the poacher. The way they'd surrounded the male and refused to leave. They didn't just follow him, Jonas said slowly. They were protecting him. They knew someone was after him. Nia nodded. They knew he was marked. She stood, her expression hardened. "We need to alert the anti-poaching task force. If Kafaru was operating in this region, they're still close. And if that hunter was one of theirs." She didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew what it meant. This wasn't over. Over the next 24 hours, the field clinic transformed into a fortress. Armed rangers doubled patrols. Drones were deployed. Roadblocks were established across known smuggling routes. The lion, now stabilized and resting, was moved to a secure enclosure surrounded by steel fencing and monitored 24/7. But Jonas wasn't satisfied. He knew Kifaru. Not personally, but by reputation. He'd heard whispers in wildlife circles. Rumors of coordinated hits on conservationists. Rangers who vanished without a trace. Entire prides that disappeared overnight, leaving only bullet casings and drag marks in the dirt. This wasn't a gang. It was a machine. A network of buyers, mercenaries, and hunters for hire. And the branded lion in their clinic? He was the smoking gun. That night, Jonas couldn't sleep. He sat outside the lion's pen, sketchbook in hand, drawing the lion's face over and over again. Each sketch more detailed than the last. The lion had been given a temporary name, Ranger, after the brave scouts who now watched over him. But Jonas couldn't stop thinking about the lionesses. They had disappeared after the transport. Slipped back into the tall grass like ghosts. "Where did you come from, Ranger?" he whispered, staring into the lion's half-lidded golden eyes. "And how did they find you?" Ranger blinked slowly, then let out a low, rumbling breath. Jonas stood and paced. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something. The next morning he got his answer. A ranger named Mosi came sprinting into the clinic, panting hard. "We found something. You need to come. Now." Jonas and Nia followed him out past the northern perimeter, where 3 guards stood with rifles raised. Behind them, crouched in the scrub grass, was one of the lionesses. Not charging. Not hiding. Waiting. Jonas stepped forward, ignoring the ranger's protests. "Hold your fire. She's not a threat." The lioness rose, locked eyes with him, and turned away. Then she looked back. A signal. "She wants us to follow her," Jonas whispered. And so they did. For nearly an hour, the lioness led them through the dry hills, stopping frequently to check if they were behind her. Eventually, she crested a slope and sat at the top, staring down into a narrow ravine below. When Jonas reached her side, his blood turned to ice. A makeshift camp. Hidden beneath a camouflage net. Satellite gear. Ammo crates. Coolers full of raw meat. And 3 more iron cages, all empty. Nia whispered, "It's a Kifaru outpost. Abandoned but recently. Fire still smoldering. Footprints everywhere. And in the dirt, dragged behind a bush, the poacher's satellite phone." Jonas grabbed it and powered it on. Still functional. GPS active. He handed it to Mosi. "We need to trace every number. Every signal. This is the break we need." Then he turned to the lioness. She sat like a sentinel, overlooking the wreckage. She hadn't brought them here by accident. Jonas knelt. "You knew where they were. You've been watching them." The lioness blinked. Jonas's voice shook. "How many others did they take?" The next few hours were chaos. Authorities arrived and the site was declared a crime scene. Evidence was bagged. Drones followed tire tracks to an old airstrip. A week prior, a black market cargo plane had landed there, and witnesses described men loading crates, animal-sized crates, under the cover of darkness. They weren't just targeting lions. They were trafficking them. And Ranger had escaped. Or been rescued. Which meant, Jonas grabbed a nearby ranger. "We need to find those other lions. If they took more, they might still be alive." The ranger hesitated. "But we don't know where they went." "No," Jonas said. "But she might." He pointed to the lioness, now lying beneath a nearby tree. She didn't flinch. Over the next day, the team combed satellite records and drone footage. Tracks led to a remote canyon near the edge of the reserve, a place seldom explored. The lioness, now dubbed Sahara, waited silently as the plans were drawn. Jonas insisted on coming along. "She trusted me once," he said. "If there are more trapped lions, I need to be there." The convoy departed at dawn. Jonas rode in the back of the lead jeep, eyes fixed on the horizon. Sahara ran ahead of them, weaving between trees like wind. By midday the canyon came into view. And that's when Jonas heard it. A roar. Faint but unmistakable. And then another. The truck skidded to a halt. Rangers raised their weapons. Jonas grabbed his binoculars. 2 more lions. In cages. Both females. Emaciated. Scarred. But alive. And standing between them and a pair of armed poachers was another lioness. Snarling. Teeth bared. Buying them time. Jonas didn't hesitate. "Go." The team surged forward. Gunfire erupted. Poachers scrambled. One ran. The other aimed, and went down hard as Mosi tackled him. Within seconds it was over. Jonas sprinted to the cages and fell to his knees. The lionesses inside looked up. Weak but breathing. He turned to the free lioness, the one who'd stood guard. Sahara. She had led them here. Again. As rangers cut open the cages and the lion stumbled out, Jonas turned and saw something that nearly broke him. One of the rescued lionesses, frail, limping, hobbled toward Sahara and collapsed against her. Sahara licked her face, nuzzled her, sat beside her like a mother reclaiming a child. It was her cub. All grown up but unmistakable. The roar shattered the silence like a thunderclap. Deep in the heart of the Tanzanian savannah, the still dawn was pierced by a bone-chilling cry, a sound soaked in agony and fear. It wasn't the commanding roar of a healthy lion, it was something else. Something broken. And it stopped a man dead in his tracks. Jonas Mbeki froze mid-step, his boots sinking into the warm red earth as birds exploded from the trees overhead. He was no stranger to the sounds of the wild. A former anti-poaching ranger turned wildlife photographer, Jonas had heard lions growl, roar, and battle before, but never like this. Never so desperate. Clutching his camera gear tightly, Jonas scanned the open plains dotted with acacia trees and tall dry grass that swayed like golden fire in the wind. The cry came again, and this time it was unmistakable. A lion was in trouble. His instincts kicked in instantly. Forget the photo shoot, this was no ordinary sound. Jonas slung his camera around his back and started running toward the source of the roar, his breath shallow, his heart pounding louder than his footsteps. Minutes passed. The cries grew fainter. Then he saw the vultures circling. That was never a good sign. Jonas pushed through a thick patch of thorn brush, the branches clawing at his arms like desperate fingers. And then, he saw him. A fully grown male lion, majestic and massive, was collapsed in a dusty hollow beneath a spindly baobab tree. His mane, once golden and proud, was matted with blood. His massive paw was caught in a steel-jawed hunting trap, the kind that crushed bone without mercy. The ground around him was torn up with deep claw marks and paw-sized streaks of blood where he'd fought to break free. Jonas gasped, stepping back as the lion lifted his head and locked eyes with him. Not rage. Not fear. And behind it, something Jonas never expected. Trust. The lion didn't growl. He didn't charge. He simply lowered his head again and let out a low, guttural groan, as if surrendering to whatever fate Jonas would bring. Jonas's voice shook as he whispered, "Oh no, what did they do to you?" He dropped to one knee and pulled his backpack around, unzipping it with trembling hands. No tranquilizer. No rifle. No vet crew. It was just him and a lion whose bones were slowly being crushed every second that trap stayed shut. The sight made Jonas sick. He knew the signs. The trap wasn't fresh. The lion had likely been caught for at least 2 full days, without food, without water. The muscle lost, the flies, the blood drying black on his fur. He was dying. And the worst part? This wasn't an accident. This was a hunter's trap. Jonas's eyes narrowed, scanning the dirt for boot prints. And sure enough, there they were. A human trail. Someone had set this trap on a wildlife corridor, hoping to maim a predator so it could be legally put down or sold off to a private collector. But they hadn't counted on someone like Jonas finding him first. He reached into his bag and pulled out the only tool he had, a compact emergency hatchet. Not ideal, but it could wedge the trap open if luck held. He stepped closer. The lion growled softly, raising his head again. His amber eyes glimmered in the early sunlight. "I'm not here to hurt you," Jonas said softly, slowly crouching just outside the lion's striking range. "But I need you to let me help you. Please." He didn't expect the lion to understand. But what happened next made his breath catch. The massive creature, easily 400 pounds of muscle and fong, lowered his head to the ground again, exposing the trap and turning his face away. He was letting him in. Jonas didn't hesitate. He crawled forward inch by inch, whispering calmly, trying to keep his own panic in check. One wrong move, one sudden noise, and this could all go sideways fast. The trap was rusted and old, illegal for years but still common in black market hunting rings. Jonas could see where the lion's bones had snapped, the skin tearing, tendons fraying with every twitch. It was a miracle the creature hadn't bled out already. He jammed the hatchet between the steel jaws and began to pry. The lion whimpered. "I know," Jonas said, his voice cracking. "I know it hurts. Just hang on." With a final grunt, Jonas forced the trap open. The lion jerked violently, roaring in agony, but didn't strike. His paw slipped free with a thick, wet sound and he collapsed fully onto the earth, shaking. Blood poured from the wound. Jonas fumbled for his shirt, tearing it off and wrapping it tightly around the paw. It wouldn't stop the bleeding completely, but it was something. He poured the last of his water over the lion's muzzle. The creature licked weakly at the stream, eyes fluttering. Then, a sound. Jonas froze. Not the lion. Footsteps. He rose slowly, turning his head, and saw a man in camouflage stepping out of the brush, hunting rifle in hand. Face hard. Cold. Well, the man said with a smirk. Aren't you a bit too late for the photo op? Jonas's blood turned to ice. You did this, he whispered. The man shrugged. It's just business. You don't really think one lion matters, do you? Jonas stepped in front of the injured animal, arms wide. You're not taking him. The hunter raised the rifle slightly. Then you better hope backup gets here real soon. Then, a growl. But not from the male lion. From behind the hunter. Jonas's eyes widened. 1, 2, 3 lionesses stepped into view. Silent. Predatory. Their eyes burned with fury. Then a fourth. Then a fifth. 5 full-grown lionesses, muscles rippling beneath golden fur, slowly encircling the man with the gun. The hunter turned, lifting the weapon too late. Jonas didn't even have time to shout. The last thing he saw was the lead lioness lunging from the grass, a blur of motion, teeth flashing. And then came the screams. Jonas felt tears sting his eyes. They weren't just a pride. They were a family torn apart and brought back together. Later, as the sun began to set, the convoy returned to the clinic with 3 lions instead of 1. Ranger stirred when they arrived. And when he saw Sahara, he let out a soft chuff. She padded into his enclosure. No hesitation. The others followed. Jonas watched, heart pounding, as the pride gathered around their king. They had found him. Defended him. And now, at last, they were whole. But just as the weight began to lift from Jonas's shoulders, Mosi stepped beside him. We traced the signal from the phone, he said grimly. It bounced through 3 proxies, but we have a location. Jonas turned. Where? A compound. Deep in the mountains. Fenced. Guarded. Not on any map. And according to intercepted chatter, Mosi hesitated. They know Ranger's alive. And they want him back. Jonas's fists clenched. They're not getting him. But Mosi shook his head. There's more. What? Mosi looked out toward the horizon. They weren't just after Ranger. He handed Jonas a file. And there, inside, was a grainy photo of a white lion cub. Tiny. Blue-eyed. Held in a cage. And branded with the same symbol. The Kafaru mark. Jonas stared at the photograph. The cub's eyes burned into his soul. Wide with terror, one paw lifted against the bars of a steel cage. But it wasn't just the eyes. It was the mark. The same scorched circle and downward spear, clear even on that tiny frame. Another victim of Kafaru. Another innocent soul. They have a cub, Jonas whispered as if saying it out loud would make it less horrifying. A white lion. Mosi nodded. Based on intercepted radio chatter, it was taken less than 2 weeks ago. Probably separated from its mother during a night raid north of the Zambezi. One of the last wild-born white lions in existence. Where are they keeping it? A private compound deep in the Karanga Mountains. Guarded. Off-grid. But the GPS trail we followed from the poacher's phone? It ended there. Jonas swallowed hard. Then that's where we go. Operation Eclipse was mobilized within hours. This was no longer just a rescue. This was a takedown. Interpol joined forces with local wildlife task forces. Jonas, despite being a civilian, was allowed to consult. His insight into Kafaru's behavior patterns was now critical intel. Nia would stay behind to care for Ranger and the Pride, who were still healing, physically and emotionally. You come back in one piece, she told Jonas, gripping his arm. And you bring that cub home. I will, he promised. Sahara, the lead lioness, watched him from the edge of the compound. She had refused to leave Ranger's side since his return, but her eyes told Jonas one thing. Finish what we started. The team flew by night in unmarked helicopters. The Karanga Range loomed below, jagged peaks and mist-shrouded cliffs. The compound sat nestled in a hidden valley surrounded by electrified fencing, watchtowers and automated searchlights. But they had a plan. While the main unit created a diversion at the north gate, Jonas and a 4-person extraction team would infiltrate from the south, where the fencing was older and less monitored. They slipped in under cover of darkness. Through thick underbrush, across shallow creeks and finally, after 2 hours of crawling, they reached the inner perimeter. There, behind a row of rusted steel crates, was the holding pen. Jonas's breath caught. Inside, under dim floodlights, was the white lion cub. She was smaller than he'd imagined. Barely the size of a house cat. Thin. her snow-pale coat dulled with grime. But her eyes, those piercing ice-blue eyes, were bright and alert. And when she saw him, she stood. No growl. No snarl. Just hope. Jonas almost broke. He whispered into his radio, "Target visual confirmed. Moving in." The others nodded, fanning out to cover him as he approached the pen. One guard patrolled nearby. Jonas timed his movement to the sweep of the searchlight, slipping behind a broken cage, cutting the lock with bolt cutters. The gate creaked. The cub flinched. Jonas dropped to his knees and held out a hand. "Hey there, little one. It's okay. I've got you now." For a moment she hesitated. Then, without a sound, she stepped forward and curled into his arms. He wrapped her in his jacket, tears stinging his eyes. "You're safe now. I promise." But the promise was premature. Behind him, a shout. "Freeze!" Floodlights blazed to life. Alarms screamed. The compound exploded into chaos. "Go!" Jonas shouted. "Get her out!" His team returned fire as they retreated into the trees, Jonas clutching the cub to his chest. Bullets tore past them. Guards gave chase. But they'd planned for this. A second team waiting in the treeline launched flares and smoke bombs, blinding and deafening the pursuing mercenaries. Jonas sprinted through the confusion, the cub trembling against his heartbeat. They made it to the extraction point just as the chopper descended, kicking up dust and leaves. Mosi yanked Jonas aboard, and the cub was transferred into a heated carrier. As they lifted off, Jonas looked back. Below, the compound was swarming with authorities. Explosives placed earlier by the Interpol team took out the supply cache and comms towers in a single, thunderous boom. Kafaru's base of operations, gone. They landed just before sunrise at the reserve's main compound. Nia was waiting. Jonas stepped off the chopper, filthy and limping, but smiling. And in his arms, the cub. Nia gasped. "She's real." Jonas nodded. "She's ours now." They rushed the cub into the recovery wing, where a special enclosure had already been prepared. Soft bedding, heat lamps, and a quiet environment free from human noise. Ranger watched from his pen, now strong enough to stand. The other lionesses paced anxiously behind him, tails flicking. Then, miraculously, the white cub let out a tiny hoarse chuff. And the pride went still. Sahara stepped forward and let out a low, rumbling call. The cub responded with a squeak, then pressed her nose to the wire mesh. And Sahara purred. Nia blinked, stunned. "They know her." Jonas nodded. "She's one of them." 3 weeks later. The white cub, now named Luma meaning light in Shona, had doubled in weight. Her coat gleamed again. She no longer flinched at human voices. And most importantly, she'd been accepted into the pride. The reunion was cautious at first. But Sahara took her under wing, literally curling around her each night, and Ranger allowed it, nuzzling her with the gentleness of a father. Jonas watched from the observation tower, heart full. "You think she'll make it?" he asked Nia, who stood beside him. "She already has," Nia said. "But someday we'll need to release them. All of them. Let them be wild again." Jonas nodded slowly. "That's the goal." He turned to her. "But we can't stop here. Kafaru's network runs deep. This was just one base. There are others. Other prides. Other cubs." Nia met his gaze. "Then we don't stop. We fight." Jonas looked down at the reunited pride. Ranger, Sahara, the lionesses, and little Luma nestled at their feet. "They fought for each other," he whispered. "Now it's our turn." 1 year later. Footage of Luma's rescue, smuggled out from a ranger's body cam, went viral. The image of a grown Luma racing through golden grass beside Ranger drew millions of views. The world rallied. Donations surged. Kafaru's name became synonymous with evil. And thanks to Jonas and Nia's testimony, several of the syndicate's leaders were arrested. But the most beautiful moment came the day the pride was released into a protected, wild sanctuary, far from roads, fences, and bullets. Ranger stepped out first. Then Sahara. Then Luma. Together. Free. Luma's story touched hearts worldwide, but millions of animals like her still suffer in silence. You can be part of the change. Share this story if you believe every life matters. Like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible rescues. Would you have done the same? Let us know in the comments. Let the world know that even in the darkest jungle, hope roars back.